You're welcome to Sahara TV and to this special segment. Last week thereabouts, President Buhari was inaugurated into office. World leaders from all over came to grace that occasion. On the sidelines, however, something happened that has gripped the attention of the whole world. Sahara Reporters had an encounter with President Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe. The video from that encounter has gone ballistic on the internet, with some praising Sahara Reporters for that brazen approach, and with some others lambasting Sahara Reporters for, being so raw, so to speak, with a visiting head of state. We are really fortunate indeed to have today one of the protagonists, or the antagonist, depending on how you look at the issue, to tell us what really went on that day. We welcome our very own Adeola Fayehun of Keeping It Real fame to tell us what really happened on that day. We also have sitting in with us our very own Fungai, Moboreke, a proud Zimbabwean who has a lot to say about what is going on in Zimbabwe. Also joining us on the line is the editor of Nihanda Radio and TV, Lance Guma, who will also bring his own perspective to the matter. You're welcome, Adeola and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, Adeola, we would like to say that we are really happy to have you back, and we are all very excited about how you have basically reached certain heights that we all are very proud of right now. But let me start by asking you, we only saw some few minutes of that video. What did we miss? What really happened that day?
Well, there was a whole inauguration that happened. Nigeria got a new president, Muhammadu Buhari. I wish you were able to also see the outgoing president, Goodluck Jonathan, and the shaking of hands between the two presidents. There were so many African presidents there that day. Vice President of Gambia was there, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia was there, Jacob Zuma of South Africa was there. There were so many heads of states that were there that day.
But what preceded your accosting President Mugabe? How did it all happen? Was it something you planned from the USA to go and do? Was it something that just happened, like you saw him and said, oh, there goes my opportunity, let me grab it?
First of all, there's no way of me knowing the presidents that would be at the inauguration. And to be honest, I didn't expect President Robert Mugabe. I didn't think he would come to something like that. And second of all, I never really see something like, oh, this is my opportunity. No, I just try to do my job, really. So when he came, it was quite interesting because suddenly I just started hearing people saying Mugabe, and I was like, wait, is Mugabe here? So I went to his car, and fortunately for me, I was the only person that tried to peep into the window, and I greeted him, and suddenly I was like, oh my God, I don't have my camera with me. So I turned around to get a cell phone that has a camera or something, and by the time I turned back to the car, the whole car was surrounded by reporters that were trying to get pictures of him. So I said, oh, well, that's the opportunity is gone or something. So I was like, oh, well. So we went on with the program, and the whole inauguration, it took hours, and I wasn't thinking about interviewing Mugabe anymore. I thought, well, I wasn't able to do it when I was right there by his car. So, but I waited till the end of the program, just trying to see if I could talk with a few people about what they think about the event that happened today. And for some weird reasons, instead of picking him up right in front of where the event took place, where they brought him, inside the venue because they brought him inside the stadium. For some weird reasons, they've been picking up a lot of presidents there, but I don't know why they didn't pick him up there. They decided for him to walk a bit to the car. And when I saw him walking, I was like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I can still ask him my questions. So that was how I ran after him.
How did the local journalists, or indeed the other journalists around, how did they react to your such brazenness? Were they like taken aback, or were they like go, go, go?
Most of the journalists were maybe gone or focused on other things by that time. I wasn't too happy though in the morning when he came because so many of the journalists, they just kept saying, oh, Mr. President, give us a smile, Mr. President, give us a smile. And that did something in me, like, of all the questions you could ask Mugabe, give us a smile, what do we do with his smile? There are so many questions to be asked. So I was a bit irritated by that. I think they were trying to get his pictures, so they kept saying, oh, Mr. President, give us a smile, but I wasn't looking for a smile. And I wasn't even like trying to, should I say, make news or anything. I just wanted to, if I could at least ask one question, that would be, for how long would this be? When will you step down as a president?
Okay, this is a good point to switch over to Lance and ask Lance. Lance, by the way, is an exiled Zimbabwean journalist living in the UK and the editor of Nihanda Radio and TV, like we've said before. Lance, Adeola is saying something right now which brings, this question to my mind. The press around there, the media around there were looking for a smile instead of...
Not all of them.
Not all of them,
yeah, some of
but
them.
just as an example, and instead of asking the tough questions. Now, people are saying that the Zimbabwean press is really not living up to the billing. It took someone from out of Zimbabwe to ask the vital question that Zimbabweans have been waiting to ask, if you will. What's your reaction to this? And first of all, before you answer that, if you can tell us how you feel about the whole encounter to start with.
I think Adeola's interview is historic. It's historic because there is a lot of hero worshipping in African journalism, not just in Zimbabwe. For some reason, we seem to look at these leaders as gods that need to be worshipped. And I think what she did was an icebreaker. And I think a lot of journalists should learn from that. She asked all the pertinent questions. I think as I speak right now, Adeola is a national hero in Zimbabwe because she asked all the questions that normal Zimbabweans are asking. Why do we have a 91-year-old president? Why do we have someone, I mean, in Burundi, they are making noise about Nkurunziza wanting to serve 3 terms. This man has served 6 terms in Zimbabwe, and he wants to stand for a 7th one in 2018. So all these are pertinent questions that need to be asked, and a lot of people are happy that someone had the courage to ask obvious questions.
Well, how do you feel, though, as a Zimbabwean journalist, albeit that you're not living in Zimbabwe, but how do you feel that this had to be done by a non-Zimbabwean? It's sort of an indictment on the Zimbabwean press. Do you agree?
It's easy for me, obviously, to say this because I'm safely in the United Kingdom. I do sympathize with my colleagues in Zimbabwe because the environment there is not as conducive to allow people to ask questions like that. As I speak right now, we have a fellow colleague, Itai Zamara, who's been missing for over 85 days. So that, kind of sums up the environment in which most journalists are operating in. Most of them in the independent media never get the chance to interview Mugabe anyway, so I suppose it might be a moot point. Only journalists from the state media get to ask questions. But if many Zimbabweans were asked to choose between an interview done by the state media with Mugabe and an interview done by Adeola with Mugabe, I think we all know which interview people would choose.
Interesting. Let me bring Fungai in the discussion at this point. Fungai, the obvious narrative is that Zimbabweans are happy that Adeola asked these questions. But I've seen a fair bit of commentary on social media that doesn't seem to suggest that. What is the real picture on the ground?
First of all, I'm enjoying this discussion because it's opening an opportunity for Zimbabweans and everybody else to express their own views and their opinion about Mugabe. And as we sit at this table, we are talking and asking Adeola, how was it easy for you to approach, as if Mugabe is supposed to be a god or some monster or creature. So already there, that doesn't go well with me as Zimbabwean. I'm thinking that this should be a president where everybody has questions, can approach, and then it's dealt with in a good way. But the question you're asking, I'm thinking people have mixed feelings, and President Mugabe has enjoyed a lifetime of media, especially in the early days of his presidency. I mean, the international media loved him, and it seemed like he loved them back, you know, because he was described in so many different ways. And then after he served longer than what normal presidents would do, that's after 2 terms, he became vilified, he became a dictator, he became a tyrant, a sycophant, all these statements started coming through. So in the eyes of who he is today, he's a liberation hero to the Africans, to the Zimbabweans. He's one of the elder wise, you know, statesmen in Africa and in the world. He's a very highly educated man. He's a very intellectual, intelligent man. You cannot doubt that. So if you find mixed feelings, even Zimbabweans I know who have been very disgruntled at the failure in which Zimbabwe is today have come in support for him because they felt like, oh my God, these people are mistreating, harassing, ambushing a defenseless old man. You know, because now at this stage we've seen where Mugabe is told to get off the podium by his very much younger wife, Grace. We've seen President Mugabe fall. You know, so there's this vulnerability that's coming up with age, with also long service. And we see, obviously, when the bodyguards or whoever his handlers are saying, Mirai, 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 we're not too sure if they're referring to...
What is Mirai?
To stop. So we're not too sure if that was in reference to Adeola, but Adeola says, I don't understand what you're saying. Or they could be telling him. And then you see that at one point he wants to respond. We know that he's very sharp on the tongue if he has to respond with journalists. He's done that with the former British journalist, where he called him an idiot. So it's one of those things where now people are sort of like lost in translation as to say these people are not practicing ethical journalism. But then how else then do you approach a president who served that and ask those same questions and expect a proper interview, you know? So it was happening as it was unfolding. So I would understand the sentiments that they could be mixed at this point.
All right, let me come back to you, Adeola. So in the video itself, we hear you saying things like, it's time to step down. There's no democracy in Zimbabwe. I have people who love what you did, but have issues with your, like your bold statement about there not being democracy in Zimbabwe and stuff like that. Were you a little too subjective in your approach?
At the beginning of the interview, I was hoping that Mr. President would answer my questions. I don't know if you listened well, but there was a point where I said, please say something, sir. Like I kept saying, please say something, sir. I wanted some kind of answers. So, but he refused to say anything. And I wasn't too happy about him not saying anything. But like so many, I don't want to say so many Zimbabweans, but even many Africans that have presidents that have stayed in power for long and not necessarily caring about their people. People have things that they wanted to say as well to him. So if he's not saying anything, if he's not answering, there were so many things that I wish that he had me saying just to see him react to it. I know that a lot of people have issues with me saying that there is no democracy in Zimbabwe, but I don't think there is democracy in Zimbabwe. Those are my opinions. It's mostly for my show, Keeping It Real. I know that a lot of people that have seen the video know nothing about the show that I do. So I don't think there is democracy in Zimbabwe. If there is, I don't see how a president can serve 6 terms, basically eliminating term limits. I don't think there's democracy in Zimbabwe if Mr. President and his wife are treating the central bank as if it's their personal bank account. I don't think there is democracy when nobody can stand up to challenge Mr. President.
Are these issues that you can defend in total if you're challenged on? Because people think that we kind of sometimes nitpick at things that the international media feeds us and run along with it. Are these issues that you have really researched and can stand up against and defend?
I really don't think this has anything to do with international media. It's a common knowledge that Mugabe has been in power since independence in 1980. I don't think that I need foreign media to tell me that.
No, but issues like him and his wife treating the central bank as their personal, piggy bank, if you will. Issues like that.
Well, it's been reported widely, mainly by Zimbabwean media, actually, about how the husband and wife is owing about $1.3 billion from the central bank, and how Grace Mugabe was in Paris, and where she spent about $120,000 on a shopping spree in one day. So unless the Zimbabwean media are lying about this, I really don't depend on international media for what I know about Zimbabwe. I do have a lot of Zimbabwean friends that I talk to about what's going on, as I have a lot of friends from other African countries because of my show. So I don't base what I do on international media. Okay.
All right. Lance, let me come to you again at this point. So you did a piece on Adeola, which on your website, which I understand has received quite an amount of reaction. What is the general reaction to the piece you did on Adeola?
24 hours after the piece we did on Adeola, the state media responded with their own piece on Adeola. It was basically lifting what I had written and turned it around, and they were calling SaharaTV Boko Haram journalists. But I think an important point that needs to be made here is that the person who is at the forefront of attacking Adeola is Zimbabwe's own information minister. Now, the same information minister in 2005, when he was still in the opposition, and I'll quote him, he said that Mugabe should step down is no longer a dismissible opposition slogan, but a strategic necessity that is desperately needed. The same person who is information minister now said exactly the same things that Adeola asked in her questions. Moyo wrote, Mugabe should go now. Mugabe is now too old. He is too tired. So what is the difference between what Adeola asked and what our own information minister was saying in 2005? This is the hypocrisy of it. Someone like me who's been covering Zimbabwe for over 15 years, I mean, I'm astounded at the level of hypocrisy that is shown by the people in power. They seem to think we have a short memory and we forget these things. And it's widely reported. And I think, though, we need a new type of journalism. I think people want gladiatorial journalism where the journalist becomes the voice of the voiceless. Millions of Zimbabweans are not able to ask what Adeola asked. And in those few minutes, 5 minutes that are now have gone viral on YouTube, she asked all the questions that all of us want to ask. Why are you still in power at 91? You are here in Nigeria to witness democracy, and yet you have no democracy in your own, why are there no term limits? He's 6th term in power. So all those are critical issues that need to be asked. And there's a big difference between the journalism practiced in the West and in Africa. I mean, if you watch a lot of interviews, Jeremy Paxman, for example, in the United Kingdom. Being aggressive as a journalist and asking hard questions is ethical. There is nothing unethical about asking hard questions. You know, unless their definition of being ethical is asking for a smile, which is what Adeola witnessed. But no, this is the way it should be done. And I can assure you 100%, Adeola is a national hero in Zimbabwe right now.
Okay, Lance. So picking up from where you left off, I'm going to read a few of the tweets that have been put out by...
By the way, before you read the tweet, I just wanted to make a comment on what he said about the information minister, because, you know, I've been following Zimbabwean politics for a little while myself. When I saw what the information minister wrote, I laughed. I didn't really take it seriously, because I remember from the same 2005, this was when he was fired by Mugabe and all that. There were some things that he didn't read in the quote. This same information minister said that Zimbabwe needed a young blood. And he said Mugabe was in his 80s at the time. This same information minister said an 80-something-year-old cannot perform the way a 30-something-year-old would perform. Like, he was really going hard on Mugabe.
To his defense, though,
so
to his defense, though, Adeola, the issue really that he has put up has nothing to do with the age or anything like that. So I'm trying to, like, center it on what actually happened, because, I mean, I don't think he referred to the age issue anywhere in his tweets. So let me just read those tweets, and then let's figure out.
The reason I brought it up is because he basically said the same things that I said in my video. Okay, so now to see him now acting as if he's Mugabe's best friend is a bit funny
that's
to
legitimate.
me.
That's very legitimate. Okay, so let me read some of the tweets that Professor Jonathan Moyo, who is the Minister for Information in Zimbabwe, has put out, and then I'll come back to you, Fungai. I know you're itching to say something. I quote from his tweet. He says, "Was Mugabe ambushed by Nigerian journalists? Yes. Did they humiliate him? No, they humiliated themselves." He also tweeted, "What's going on here? It's a sad tale of man biting a dog when journalists make the news they should be covering." He further says, "The so-called reporters of SaharaTV are overheard asking for President Zuma, apparently to give them a similar treatment." And we'll come to that in a second, the issue about Zuma, President Zuma. And then he also says, "The journalists, or whoever they were sick, were not asking questions, but they were making fools of themselves and their country." He also says that would not happen in Zimbabwe against any visiting head of state or government, not even Barack Obama or David Cameron. And I find that a bit, I don't know why he referred to Barack Obama and David Cameron. He said quite a fair bit, but there's one where he referred to Sahara Reporters as Boko Haram. He says free countries have rules including diplomatic courtesy, not display of Boko Haram journalism. What is your reaction to that, Fungai?
He has a job to do. He has a job to do, and part of his job is to take these kind of incidents and spin them around and feed them back to the Zimbabwean people, who I think at this point he thinks their silence means they are stupid or they don't get what's going on. So it's what he does. That's the kind of information. But a lot of people think it's misinformation because, first of all, when you can just say Sahara Reporters are Boko Haram, you don't know how to prove that. You're just saying, and then pile up, oh, they're being treated, they were educated by the West, which of course he was too at some point. And then they are there to embarrass African leaders. You know, you can tell that this man is working and doing his job in a government that is performing the way it is. So there's not much we can expect from what he's saying, truthfully, as an intelligent Zimbabwean. It's just to keep quiet and watch him.
Are you saying that it depends on who he works for, like the side that he's on?
But he's much more intelligent than that for him to be saying things like that. So I think Zimbabweans expect that kind of propaganda, if you can call it, where he's trying to divert people from the main question and then lead them to a different thinking. And the West is obvious. That's why he quotes Obama and Cameron, because that's been the propaganda, the West, the West, the West. We had the Chinese. I don't know if it's going to be the East, the East, the East, or the Chinese. So the question is, when is Zimbabwe going to take responsibility of its own failures?
I think that's the
If
I may
point.
say just one thing though about this tweet, it's like, how do you really define an ambush? It wasn't as if, okay, so Mugabe was walking by and journalists were there. If I had asked questions like, how was your day? I don't think they would have defined it as an ambush.
That's right.
He was just walking by, and there were so many people there. People were passing by. It wasn't as if we put him in a corner or something. Like, he was just walking by. It was a free place for everyone to walk by. And journalists, I had my media press pass. I had the right to be where I was. It wasn't as if I jumped the fence to go and ambush him or something. So I found that really funny that they defined it as an ambush.
We're gonna go on a quick break and come right back. There's still a lot to say, but before we do though, in just a quick word, you've done the same thing with President Goodluck Jonathan. Did anybody use the word ambush for that one?
They used ambush for that too, but I don't think it's the same thing. For President Goodluck Jonathan, he actually answered the question. I think it's a matter of was he comfortable answering the questions. It was actually an interview. It was a short one, but it was actually an interview. For Mr. Mugabe, he did not answer any questions.
Okay. So we're going to go on a quick break at this point. When we come back, we will invite viewers to join the discourse briefly, and you can join the discourse by calling +1 for the United States, 917-281-9811. I repeat that, +1 917-281-9811. We'll be right back after this short break.